Hi everyone, and welcome to your horoscope for the week of October 25th, 2021. We have a very powerful, very intense, very momentum-oriented sky playing out all through the week. But all of us, in our own ways, are already used to this. This week follows the super intense and emotionally awakening full moon that we had in the sign of Aries on the 20th of October. And this is where it was kind of different for everyone. For some people, this full moon was emotionally awakening in a very delightful sense, let's say. They tapped into their courage, their ambition, their willpower, their sovereignty. And for other people, this was almost like a really powerful reality check of emotional nature, which basically is the same thing. It was awakening and courage and all of that, but maybe it was a crisis, a very hard to face truth that basically triggered this. So for some people it was more like, let's say, positive, for other people more like a crisis. But this is one of the aspects which prove the multi-dimensional nature of the astrological energies, because the very same expression, the very same aspect does the same thing for everyone, but in so very many different ways. And that is where the touch of our personality, our choices, the past, our conditioning, but also our authenticity makes everything all the difference. This week is continuing the exact same theme. As I have said in the Mercury retrograde horoscope, this is the period when Mercury goes direct and reholds the same celestial conversations that it held both in shadow and both in retrograde. So this is a period for all of us, and big conclusions are definitely going to be drawn. Clarity is going to come to us, empowering us and giving us the wisdom, the strength, and the inner GPS basically to make those very difficult choices, to make those very difficult actions that will ultimately guide us to our future. And this all sounds so wonderful, but it's not going to be easy. Sometimes it is exactly the clarity and the profound way that we were taught by the karmic forces during this Mercury retrograde season to look at life, to look at everything that basically requires us to make a choice or to have a contribution or an action, a decision in the most truthful manner. Well, that is a blessing, but at the same time, there are many things that sometimes we just want to ignore, that we don't want to look at, and this is where we will have no choice. So yes, our choices are gonna be empowered, but it's not just the optimism, the thirst for life, embracing our futures and all the passion and basically devotion to our own life path that will fuel it. But also, that is one side of the coin. The other side is the hard to face truth. Everything in our lives that we feel totally powerless against, that we have no word to say, no influence, and those things need to be accepted and surrendered. And once again, we get back to the prayer of serenity, where one way or another we will ask the divine, or the spiritual forces, to give us the strength to change all that we can, to give us the serenity to accept and process all those things that we don't have power over, and the wisdom and the divine guidance to know the difference, to know the situation. So basically, this is where it's both really good and really optimistic and passionate, and very sad and disillusioning at the same time. So, this energy is not very easy to process, because there is this element. What do we focus on? This is a week where we will not be allowed, we will simply not be permitted, either by karmic forces, inner forces, our instincts, or our friends and family, our advisors, to just look at the world through a rose-tinted glass and choose the positive side, the good frequency. But at the same time, the rose-tinted glass is still gonna be there, so it will neither allow us to tap into doom and gloom and the drama and the verse of the verse, and like it or not, we will be looking at the world both through rose-tinted glass and both through black and white. And this is a kind of, symbolically speaking, constructive insanity, if that makes sense, which will actually catapult us to where we need to be. So, regardless of how chaotic and confusing, but this time, it is exactly the clarity that confuses us, because we will know, we will see, we will feel, and that is authentic, that is true. But maybe it will be our instincts that will just tell us, well, yes, we have this clarity, we know what we want, we see other people for who they are, we see the truth and the potential outcome of a situation, good or bad. But what do we do with all of this? It's too much, it's a bit too much for the gut feeling, for the instinct to actually steer us this time. So we will have to muster every inner strength that we have within us to make certain very, very difficult choices and steps. And this is where, don't get me wrong, for some people it's exactly the blessing that will be even more difficult than the inconveniences, because when the blessing comes, that's like such a big blessing that it intimidates us. So we will need a lot of inner strength, and basically I do believe that the best term to use is profound empathy and understanding and compassion towards the self, as in almost like looking at ourselves as just children, but the parent, the teacher, the guide is also us. So that is what we need to do with ourselves. Be patient when it's the case, but push ourselves, determine ourselves, ambition ourselves at the same time. This is one of those weeks when all of us are gonna be, symbolically to be understood, of course, like adolescent children, impatient, fearful, but full of desire. So as a parent, it's not gonna be easy to steer ourselves in the right direction, despite the fact that deep inside of us, in our hearts of hearts, we will know exactly what the right direction is, if that makes sense. So yes, we have to prepare ourselves. Now let's take a look at the predominant aspects of next week, and there's a lot of them. There is a lot of good and also a lot of challenge. And if we are truly wise and diligent, whatever blessing this week and the week that follows is going to be there in our lives, we have to embrace it and one way or another store it for the week and months to come, because that is when the real challenge is beginning, and not just collectively, but also individually. The sun is already in the sign of Scorpio, and that basically puts the astrological emphasis on this part of the sky, one that is about profound transformation based on the truth, based on clarity, detective kind of energy. So on one hand, on the world stage, that's very clear. It's investigations, revelations, truth-seeking, digging deep, etc., etc. But this also goes individually. So this is, we want to understand ourselves. Again, back to the drawing board regarding inner work, self-psychoanalysis, traumas, repressed emotions, why this, why that. Scorpio is also a rather powerful material, financial in that sense energy. So again, we will ask ourselves, what blocks our finances, as in a psychological blockage? What's our misaligned belief regarding our self-worth? So I do believe that in these last couple of years, ever since Uranus entered the sign of Taurus, we are already used to doing this every single autumn until 2026. And you might ask yourself, well, why Taurus and Uranus? Well, because it's the opposite sign of Scorpio. So basically whatever happens in Taurus, and Uranus is the energy of the cold hard truth, is reflected upon Scorpio. So it causes profound transformation. Basically that triggers our regeneration. But with every regeneration, this is where all the pus that we have stored within ourselves years after years, the past, childhood, school years, adolescence, failed relationships, failed friendships, everything that ever disappointed us, well, this is coming out, and this will be, I'm not gonna lie, the theme of every single autumn until 2026, because that means that the sun will oppose Uranus, and that is always the truth. That is always like, you know, when you ask your best friend, be honest with me, don't have any mercy, just tell me things as they are, and they do, and it kind of hurts. Yes, we play the role of the mature person who accepts it, embraces it, and understands it, and yes, of course, but in our hearts of hearts, the truth does hit us. And the nature of Taurus and Scorpio, well, on one hand, it is about values, and even if we disregard our material lives, it's still self-worth. And self-worth is such a delicate subject for everyone, and even for those people who we might think like movie stars and VIPs and stuff like that, that theirs is crystal clear, solid. And surprise, surprise, actually it's not. And under this energy, that's when everyone does this job, not just us, the little people, but even those people who actually, their strongest point is their self-confidence and self-worth, for example. Because this kind of energy is like a double-edged sword. It forces those people who have really low self-worth for any reason to heal that, as I said, until 2026. But those who are living in delusion and their egos are as big as the galactic center, well, that also is going to be demolished until it reaches very healthy levels. And this is the irony, because those people who have a very low self-worth, well, theirs can only increase. But for those people who are, for all their lives, regardless for what reason, overconfident and felt always like the center of the universe, well, it's imploding. And it is those people who are in implosion, psychologically speaking, that we should actually be worried about. But anyway, so this week starts the theme of a profound psychological purge. And yes, once again, this year as well. And at the very, very end of the week, Mars enters into this sign as well. And this is Mars' ancient ruling sign. This is where Mars is very, very powerful. So we will need all the clarity that we can possibly get. And this isn't like the mercurial kind of clarity. This is like psychology. This is like the heavy stuff. Self-knowledge, profound self-knowledge. And we'll need it because Mars is the planet of action in the sign of Scorpio. It transforms, and whenever Mars touches Scorpio, it's one way or another a phoenix moment. And we want to make sure that whatever is being rebirthed within us, well, that is based on authenticity. But before Mars gets the chance to enter into his ancient ruling sign, first of all, it holds, and this is an aspect that we inherit from last week, a trine with Jupiter, which is the blessing here. Empowered action, optimism, belief in our dreams, in our goals, in our ideals is going to give us a lot of strength to make choices, even difficult choices, to change relationships, to have the courage, perhaps, to ask a person who we might think that it's totally out of our leagues to help us or make an alliance with us or anything of this nature. Yes, including romantic stuff is in this picture. But at the same time, we will also have the courage and the power to express very difficult truth to other people who might intimidate us. And this energy is really good to get our point across, to get our truth across, to terminate our relationship, to, tell certain people that we no longer accept them to hold power over us, to ask of others to be more understanding of us. So I do believe that you kind of get the picture, and chances are we already know what this action is, because this was, for us individually, the main theme of Mercury retrograde season. So just think back. What happened in your relationships, regardless of which nature, starting from the last week of September until this present moment, so you will know who and what and in which way. So this Mars is just the courage and the inner power, the action, the determination. You need to do that which you were thinking of, contemplating of, ever since the start of this Mercury retrograde season. And this was the blessing. The not so favorable aspect is Mars holding the square with Pluto. Fortunately, the square is no longer exact, so the energy of powerlessness, deep frustration, impatience, not being able to change either our lives or a relationship or a situation, an area of life in a way that we wanted, because we lack something, a power, something that has to do with the singularity of Mars. And we still, under the influence of this energy, have to accept it, have to find a way around that, have to turn this real hardship into some kind of a strength. And in this situation where Mars is in exile, well, that strength can only be the strength of wisdom, the strength of understanding, the strength of not allowing the frustration to get the better of us, the strength of staying optimistic regardless of what reality shows, the strength to live the now despite the fact that the future is so very uncertain. So this will be what we have to do to turn this Mars-Pluto square into its highest possible expression, which is ultimately wisdom, solid life experience, and the inner strength to basically overcome all challenges one way or another. When we cannot outfight something, we have to outsmart it. When we cannot outsmart it, we have to outnumber it. When we cannot do anything, well, maybe we have to out-spiritualize it. There's always a hidden way. There's always a different path. And that is the challenge of the square. If we allow the frustration to get the better of us, we will feel defeated, powerless. It stops there. But if we, despite the challenge, find some inner motivation to look for that other way around, to look for whatever this is, then we are already giving ourselves a chance. We are using the very, very higher end of this energy. Sometimes, giving up doesn't mean the death of our dream or desire or goal. It just means that we give up on our expectation of how we think, or we tactically envisage in our minds of how we want to get there, how it would feel like, etc. We give up on that, yes, but we also give way to the universe to inspire us to a different approach. So basically, sometimes defeat is the best thing that could ever happen to us. Because, Pluto, it is a very strong planet, very strong astrological power player, and it can be so cruel and wicked at times. But it's actually the truth that it holds that we perceive as cruel, because it disillusions us. It breaks our hearts, but only if our hearts are filled with an illusion. And regardless of how beautiful and noble that illusion is, it is the death of the illusion or delusion, or maybe the innocent, the naivety of our approach that hurts us so much, and not necessarily the defeat itself. But once an illusion is defeated, we can approach it again, once again, with the power of the truth. And as you know, I hate talking about myself, but I have to evoke my own example because the power of example is the best source of wisdom, practical wisdom. And this is where when I was young and finished high school, I trained to be a lawyer because that was my vision, my ideal, that I'll fight for people with the power of my words. Being a Gemini, I always knew that that was my power. And of course, both the universe and other people kind of wanted to let me know that it doesn't matter how smart you are, it doesn't matter how much you study, being a lawyer means you have to do the dirty work. And being a lawyer means that sometimes that person in front of you is just a case number and not a living, breathing human being. And, could I do that? And of course not, because I'm an idealist. But I said to myself, don't worry, I'm spiritual. I can find a way to make it work. And of course I couldn't find a way to make it work, and I was burned out, and I was so shocked of what human justice is outside the benches of the university that, it was instant defeat. Pluto. Pluto is also the planet of alchemy and transformation, and what I learned at uni outside of the law and stuff like that was how to interpret words, situations, reality. So I wouldn't be an astrologer now, or maybe not the astrologer I am today, without the courses at uni. Because if I can interpret a human law, I can also interpret divine law, and the patterns of the stars are where the divine law is written. That is basically the paper, the publication of the law. So basically, life alchemized my defeat into something totally else, something that I was not expecting. So I'm not a lawyer, but I am still a lawyer of the divine architect, where a person who contacts me for their birth chart, well, I advocate by showing them the good intent of the divine in their lives and their fate, karma, blah, blah, blah. So keep this in mind. Whenever you're defeated, whenever life stops you from living your dream, let's say, it's not really what it seems. It just wants you to be aware of a truth that might spoil your dream. Would you get it in that way? So it's never really over. It's never really defeat, only if you allow it. So whatever hardships this Mars and Pluto square do for you, don't worry. Look at the power of transformation. In which way is it transforming you based on a truth? And also, this square might just be the setup for Mars and Pluto conjunction in a few months, which might be a grand finale of what this Mars and Pluto square did for you. And also, don't understand this energy as something one time off. This is what happens in our lives every 2 years, because Mars and Pluto will hold this conversation every single 2 years. So just look at your life as 2-year cycles. What is recurring every 2 years for you? And finding that out will give you a hint of how this Mars and Pluto is transforming slowly but surely your life. Where is it guiding you? And speaking about the truth, well, we also have a really confusing aspect, which is Venus squaring her higher octave Neptune. And this is the kind of energy where its most elevated expression is actually the most dangerous one. Because at the end of the day, this is a highly illusionary energy, because it's all based on faith, it's all based on aspirations, higher thinking, philosophies. Venus in the sign of Sagittarius. Our most elevated desires and the philosophy of everything that we love. And let me just give you an example how to understand Venus in the sign of Sagittarius. Let's say that you have a passion or a love for cars. That's Venus, that's a Venusian expression. But when Venus is in the sign of Sagittarius, it's not really about the car. It's about asking yourself the question, what is it about the car that makes you love it so much? Is it the freedom of going where you want that it offers you? Is it the social symbol that you have a car, a beautiful car? Is it the example of someone in your family where it was maybe your father, brother, or someone who loved cars just as much and they ignited that passion of yours, and it is actually your father figure that you love? What he used to love, and your soul is paying tribute to that love. So this is the energy of Venus in Sagittarius. It's not about the object, the person. It's about the deeper meaning of it, the higher meaning. And Neptune, well, drowns this. So it makes it even more surreal. It makes it even more psychological, meaning that we can get so very lost in our higher desires. We might get, how should I say, disconnected from physical reality, and this is the least dangerous part of this aspect, because the dangerous part of this aspect is more, let's say, spiritual in nature. Be careful what you wish for, because sometimes you get it suddenly, unexpectedly, and then what do you do with it? You know, sometimes getting what we want is not the best thing, because a dream, a desire, a principle, a pure motivation, let's say, motivation in life, so the big things, can be killed by getting what you want. You know, this is where not getting what you want, exactly what I said earlier, the Plutonian expression, the transformation, the carrot on the stick, let's be honest, that doesn't really kill your dream. That makes you stronger, more ambitious, more cunning, more wise, more intelligent. Getting what you want, it kills it there and then. So maybe when we wish for something, not getting it 100%, maybe getting it in fragments or getting it imperfectly is much, much better, a much bigger blessing than getting it. And this energy can be most important in matters of love and romance. Sometimes getting our desires in the romantic sense might not really be a dream come true, because how much do we know ourselves? We think we know ourselves, but after we get it, we experience it, we embrace it, all of a sudden reality check. Well, it doesn't make me feel as loved, as special, as happy, as satisfied as I originally thought. So what do I do now? Break the person's heart? So I am going to leave it like this. And yet another, and this is actually a dangerous expression of this energy in a real sense. Be careful with addictions, be careful with substances, with what kind of escapism you crave, because there is a chance to overdo it. Venus in Sagittarius, only the sky is the limit. Neptune in the sign of Pisces, it just breathes it in as much excessively as it's available. It cannot see the limits, it cannot see the logic, the ration. And adding the Mars and Pluto square, most of us will desire some way of escaping reality. So, you know, be careful with escapism this week especially. And also we have a very positive aspect that Venus holds, a sextile with Jupiter. And this is what we make of it, because Jupiter is the planet of expansion. It makes Venus even stronger than she even is normally in Sagittarius. So that means if we want escapism, we'll get it. So, you know, have limits, know yourself, know your shadow, and basically be able to tell reality from fantasy. But on a very positive note, Venus sextile Jupiter is a wonderful energy. It is good for romance. It is good for everything artistic. It is good for embracing life, loving life, living life, making your faith, your principles, everything that you believe in, everything that you aspire, desire. Jupiter in Aquarius. It can turn into a really, really powerful motivational force, sharing your thoughts, your most beautiful thoughts, sharing your principles, your ideas, everything that is very, very intellectually beautiful about you, philosophically beautiful about you, basically the beauty of your soul and higher thinking. It can make you very, very magnetic. So believe, by all means believe, and allow optimism and faith and the good things to motivate you. Just use it and see it as such, motivation, and not a drowning force, not something that pushes you into fantasy. But there comes another aspect yet, where yes, there is this excessive fantasy and seeing what we want to see, what we desire to see in anything, another person, for example. But we also have a very tough reality check. The sun in the sign of Scorpio holds a square with Saturn. That is where reality bites us in certain body parts. Saturn is limitations, inner limitations, but this is where it's much more like outer limitations, and in the sign of Aquarius, restrictions, rules, COVID, the law and legislation that just changes, that might take away our freedom, it might prevent us from travel, from work, etc., etc. So that is where reality bites us, but what we have to do with the sun in Scorpio, adapt, be patient, endure, not give up, but neither fight it. It must not turn into anger, into frustration, into our worst instinctual selves. A wounded animal, it bites. Or this is where fight or flight, when in truth all we might have to do is just be a little bit patient and quiet and understanding with ourselves instead of fighting or flighting, if that makes sense. And also from a psychological perspective, this energy is not easy. It's melancholic. It is rather painful because it isn't just about the present, Scorpio. It's also about the past. Whatever limitations are here in our lives in the now, they also remind us of when we were younger, of all of our bad experiences, disappointment, when other people were not reliable and they let us down, when we let ourselves down. So take this into consideration, that this is going to be a theme, so don't allow this to once again drown you. But where this time our souls, or let's just say our psyches, might be playing tricks on us, like for example, maybe even for those people who might not have too many limitations in their lives, well, this energy can turn into a really toxic nostalgia, if you get what I mean. For example, well, I'm okay today, I'm okay in the now, but the world isn't how it used to be in, let's say, the 80s, when I was young. It was so lovely then. I had all this freedom, I had this and that, and I'm not the same person right now, and this can cause a different kind of depressive vibes, if you know what I mean. So this Saturn will find us regardless of how life is. If it cannot find us in the now, it will find us in the past. If what we have and who we are right now simply cannot disappoint us, well, this Saturn will make disappointment be lived in a different way, through our memories, nostalgia. It might evoke all the beautiful memories, all the moments of sheer joy and bliss, and then we will have no choice but to compare that even though we are so very happy right now, we're not as happy as we used to be in a certain given date in our past. So don't let this energy to trick you. Accept it as a reality check, in the sense that limitations have their uses and their roles in our lives, and we mustn't necessarily allow them to oppress us, but just make us more diligent, make us more responsible, and ultimately make us live in the real world as well. But where I want to get with this is that the saving grace here is our mental sphere, Mercury. Mercury holds sextile with Venus. Mercury direct this time holds a trine with Jupiter. This is where us rationally being able to make sense of life can be a massive help, especially when our psyche is a little bit wishy-washy. Then strength is in the mind, mind over matter, and mind over emotion, mind over melancholy, etc. And let me just give you an example. Regardless of what you might be feeling emotionally, use Mercury. You have running water, you have hot water, you can take a bath, you can take a shower, you have a bed, you have a roof over your head, you have people to talk to, even if they might not understand you perfectly, but you can still share your thoughts. So there are always blessings even in the now. You just need to point those out for yourself. Jupiter trine Mercury, the power, the healing, and regenerative power of deep gratitude. And also, Jupiter in Aquarius trine Mercury and Libra, friends, acquaintances, all the good people in your life, their blessings. Or maybe something really good and positive that you might have done for someone under this Mercury retrograde returns to your life. That person thanks you. That person expresses their gratitude. Or vice versa. You take a lot of joy by expressing your gratitude to a person who helped you under a Mercury retrograde season. This is blessings, this is support, this is healing words, words of appreciation, words where they anoint the soul like honey. But of course, there is also tension where Mercury will start holding the square with Pluto. Fortunately, it's not going to be exact this week, only the week after. But still, when Mercury squares Pluto, take action based on truth, the most uncomfortable truth. But it is not as painful, if you know what I mean, as it was under the Mercury retrograde season, because we already know what the painful truth is, just that now we just have to make a choice with it, a compromise, a decision, a termination perhaps, or speak that truth which we already have within us, as uncomfortable as that might be. But there is also another type of energy where Mercury holds a quincunx with Uranus, its higher octave. Divine synchronicity, divine guidance, divine help. Not of the intuitive kind, that's also true. This is where it's much more cerebral kind of divine guidance, if you know what I mean. For example, the numbers, seeing the numbers, and you having to think about them. Seeing symbols, hearing a song, and you having to rationalize the lyrics to understand what the universe is telling you. Random thoughts, big epiphanies, eureka moments, light bulb moments, where you just have to dig deeply in order to understand the meaning, even if the meaning is so very random. Also, whenever Mercury holds this conversation with Uranus, especially that Mercury is in the sign of Libra, what other people say, friends, partners, whoever might be of any alliance with you, their words subliminally may, transmit the message of the divine. As they say, God speaks through people. So pay close attention to certain, let's say, random or weird things that other people might be saying for no reason. Don't try to look at why they said it, but rather look at it what the divine wants to tell you through their random moment. And also at the very end of the week, Mars enters into the sign of Scorpio, and I already spoke about this energy at the beginning of this recording, so prepare for intensity. prepare for psychological intensity. But this is, of course, also a good empowerment, because Mars in the sign of Scorpio is known as the treasure seeker, the treasure digger. So financially, this can be a really good astrological energy, because this is where you get what you want as long as you stay focused on it, the singularity, the ambition. Where there is a will, Mars, there is a way, Scorpio. But of course, before it enters into this part of the sky, it's going to be at an erratic degree in the sign of Libra. And this is a little bit delicate, because Mars, on one hand, as I said, it is in exile in Libra. So it's not very comfortable. And sometimes Mars in Libra, it's not you. It's the intervention, the meddling of other people in your life. Even if they're motivated by the best intent, they can do good. Sometimes they say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And the other hand, Mars in an erratic degree, well, it is sometimes conflict oriented. It is like a spark where something as innocent as it may seem may spark a big conflict. And this spark is bound to create a big inferno, like symbolically take, like as if that spark is surrounded by dried hay, because this is the part of the sky that astrologers call via combusta, the path of fire. So this is where conflicts usually brew and enemies are made, because the 7th house is also the house of our enemies, our declared enemies, if that makes sense. So enemies who we definitely know that are against us. So these three factors, the via combusta, Libra, Mars's exile, and an erratic degree, make this very volatile energy. So on the 30th and 31st of October, try to avoid conflictual situations. If there's any kind of spark as a misunderstanding, stuff like that, don't feed it. Don't make it worse. Just, if you can, walk away or stay silent, swallow the pride. Don't dig, don't want to see the deeper meaning of what someone says, even if it seems offensive. Or if some people motivated by the best intent and love and whatever want to meddle in your life, in your affairs, etc., just tell them that I know you're good intended, but don't do this now, because nothing good will come of it. And even if they might tell you, well, I'm looking out for your best interest and you don't even appreciate it, what kind of friend are you? Try to tap into your diplomacy, the sign of Libra with Mercury in it, and just make peace somehow. And especially if you have a life partner, a boyfriend, girlfriend, or any kind of person in alliance with you who you know that there sometimes are sparks in conversations and diverging opinions and life views, stuff like that. Just be very careful. Don't give in to the conflict. And last but not least, what does all of what I said until now mean on the world stage? Well, it's very simple. The predominant aspect is Eris and Mars, and later on Mercury holding the T-square with Pluto. Chaos, financial instability, truths coming out, political battles where politicians will just backstab themselves, they will accuse one another of corruption. There will be a lot of issues on the world stage. It is going to be so very event-filled on the world stage that there isn't even point about talking about it, predicting it. There's no point really. It's going to be so intense, so shocking, so unsettling, so tumultuous that it's pointless to even try and predict it, if that makes sense. And also there is the thing where it happens on the world stage, but then it also happens in your own country, even in your own local community city. So this is where it's going to be so chaotic and so much of it that predicting it this time has absolutely no use, no sense. It's futile. So just try to stay as detached as possible. Don't give in to fear and live your life story as full of tension, full of maybe even contradiction this week. But still, this is where you have to be there and make the choices, decision, live it more intensely than ever before, because you're making sure that you're taking as much control as you can of how these events are gonna determine the close future. And this is very important because, this targets one area of your life. May that be with your alliances, everything that you love, your career, your job, your everyday rituals, your own personality and public image, or whatever area of that life it is. You must be the most wisest and diligent self right now to make sure that the close future is as comfortable as it can be, because that's very important right now. So this concludes the horoscope. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed it and found it useful and would like to support my work so that I can create much more guidance and horoscopes in the week to come, you can find my PayPal link in the description below. With this being said, please be present in your life. Don't get lost in any kind of fantasy illusion, even the blessings. Be very, very careful with escapism, not to overdo it or overspending or promising someone eternal love when you're not even sure. And last but not least, don't be afraid of making the bad choice, the wrong choice, because sometimes in life there is no right or wrong, there is just which path we take. So thank you again, until next time, bye for now.